A major reversal from Dr. Anthony Fauci on keeping schools open as one of the president's key coronavirus advisors resigns. I'll break it all down for you. It's time for Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. A big shakeup at the White House. Dr. Scott Atlas, a special advisor to President Donald Trump, who's been a vocal skeptic of many of the measures being used to control the coronavirus outbreak, well, he's abruptly announced his resignation. For months now, Dr. Atlas has been pilloried by the left and even some in the scientific community for daring to break with alarmists who continue to demand lockdowns and school closures. Fearmongers like Nancy Pelosi, who said this about reopening schools back in August.
Are you confident that students and teachers will go back safely to school in the fall?
No, I think what we heard from the secretary was malfeasance and dereliction of duty. This is appalling. They're messing. The president and his administration are messing with the health of our children. Going back to school presents the biggest risk for the spread of the coronavirus.
Rule of thumb for politics in America: anytime Nancy Pelosi tells you it's about the children, she's lying to you. She said it wasn't just a risk, but the biggest risk for spreading the coronavirus. Here's how Dr. Atlas responded that same month, looking at the same data. Watch.
As Nancy Pelosi says that this is the biggest risk to the spread of the virus if the kids go back in September.
I think we have a different scale because that's just completely wrong and contrary to all the science. I'm not sure how many times it has to be said, but the risk to children from this disease for fatality is nearly zero. This is a level of hysteria. Like, this is something I feel like I'm living in a Kafka novel. We are willing to just simply destroy our children out of some bizarre notion that is completely contrary to the science.
He was right. They were wrong. We were right. I've been saying this for months. The lockdown libs, the left, the Democrats, all the blue check MDs on Twitter, all over social media, who were saying, don't sacrifice our children, don't reopen schools. Of course, there was a presidential election in the background of all this too. Not that that mattered to anybody, I'm sure. They were all wrong. Wrong, false, got the answer to the test incorrect. I think we should all note that. Despite his departure from the White House, Dr. Atlas is not backing down. In his resignation letter posted to Twitter, Atlas writes, more and more, the relatively low risk to children of serious harms from the infection, the less frequent spread from children, and the severe harms from closing schools and society are all being acknowledged. Yeah, but not fast enough. This guy deserves an apology from many of his colleagues, certainly from the mainstream media. He's been right all along. But his resignation comes just as it appears the rest of the scientific community, including Dr. Fauci, is starting to come around to his position, also known as objective reality. Earlier this week, Fauci gave his most full-throated endorsement yet of keeping schools open during the pandemic.
Close the bars and keep the schools open. The default position should be to try as best as possible within reason to keep the children in school or to get them back to school. If you look at the data, the spread among children and from children is not really very big at all, not like one would have suspected.
So what changed, Dr. Fauci? The difference in the data? Well, guess what? The data has been telling us the same thing for months. In fact, the data all along has indicated that children were at almost no risk from this, but they are certainly at risk from schools being shut down and from people deciding that no longer do our children have a right to see each other, to live their lives, to be taught. They're falling behind. Some of them will never catch up to where they should be at their grade level because of this fear and panic response. You see, there are costs to the wrongness of these COVID lockdowns. It's not really talked about very much. And now that at least our media has moved past this election for the most part, perhaps we can begin to have a real conversation about it, but we need to have it right now and right away, because otherwise our public health experts, who have been catastrophically wrong at critical points all along this fight against COVID, are going to do what they always do. Take the position that maximum restrictions, maximum lockdown that's politically feasible, which unfortunately is far higher than it should have been all along, But whatever they can get away with pushing for, they will. But there are consequences, as I say, to all of this. Look at what's gone on now with children. Look at the rates of anxiety and depression and drug addiction and suicide across the country, not just in and around the school system, because of these lockdowns. Look at what this is doing to us. There was an article today written in the Detroit Free Press that referred to all of us as potential serial killers for breathing. This is mass hysteria coupled with mass media. These people are losing their minds over COVID. They've been brainwashed into thinking there's nothing too extreme, and therefore whatever the government wants to do to control you, to protect you from it, is acceptable. Never mind that there was just a Supreme Court ruling that flatly said you can't do this unconstitutional stuff just because you say there's a pandemic out there. It was very straightforward. Think about what it's doing to small businesses now. Depending on the city, depending on the region and the state, 30%, 40%, as many as 50% in places like New York City of small businesses may close forever over the course of this winter. That's going to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses with millions of employees, with people whose lives are ruined, whose bank accounts drained to zero, life's work decades long, years long in the making. And what do they get for all of this? Skyrocketing cases, skyrocketing hospitalizations all across the country, irrespective of the degree of the mandate. The lockdowns, the masks, all of this. They insist that you do not notice what is all around you. We are reaching now higher levels of caseload in major population centers of this country, more people sick with COVID-19 than we've ever had before at one time on one day. New cases are skyrocketing. We have hospitalizations going way up. This is all real. This is all happening. And yes, it's frightening. But because we're afraid doesn't mean that we can't look at the costs of improper responses to that fear. School shutdowns were wrong. People that pointed it out at the time were mocked, were laughed at, were threatened, were called monsters. How dare you want to risk our children? There was no risk to children. They were fine. And now we all know that. Guess what? At the end of all of these lockdowns, we'll turn around and say, hold on a second. Why is it that no matter when a place locks down, no matter when these policies, these restrictions by the state go into effect, you can't actually draw even a correlation, never mind a causation, with a major drop in cases? Doesn't seem to be happening anywhere. And we've already run this experiment once before as a nation. What was the worst single place in the country for COVID-19 cases in the initial wave? New York and New Jersey. What place has continued its lockdown policy all through the summer, never got above 25% indoor capacity for dining? New York City. Mask mandates everywhere. Social distancing propaganda all over the place. And the cases keep going up. Just because people are rightly concerned or even scared of the COVID-19 virus does not mean that the Constitution is suspended, and it doesn't mean that we can't weigh the costs of government policy that have guaranteed drawbacks and promised but somehow never manifested benefits. Maybe it's time we look at this a little bit differently. Maybe it's time we start weighing what's an appropriate and acceptable response against what the real risk is. We didn't do that with schools, and I don't think we're doing it now with lockdowns in small businesses either. And the economic catastrophe that's going to unfold as a result of this, the devastation of cities in particular that will occur, you won't see this cost for a while. But guess what? Just like with school lockdowns, they'll turn around and say, but we were relying on the data. And I'm here to tell you, no, they're not. Fellow patriots, MAGA CBD is a revolutionary American-made product that is safe for work, THC-free, and features patented NASA technology. So it's the highest quality CBD oil you can get on the market. They're dedicated to providing the purest, most effective products anywhere. MAGA CBD provides third-party testing results from industry-leading experts. They prove what they're saying. MAGA CBD is 100% committed to customer satisfaction and product quality. Best of all, 10% of proceeds benefit veterans and first responders. Look, MAGA CBD has helped me sleep through the night, something that I've struggled with a lot in the past. And when you taste the difference with their apple pie flavored oil, you'll realize this is the best CBD you're going to get anywhere. Plus, what CBD product in the market could be more American? MAGA, NASA, apple pie. It's America at its finest. For your CBD needs, look no further than MAGA CBD. Learn more and order today at magacbd.org and save 10% with promo code BUCK. That's magacbd, Charlie Bravo Delta.org, promo code BUCK.
What is your expectations come June for how many Americans will have had this vaccine?
100% of Americans that want the vaccine will have had the vaccine by that point in time.
That's some great news in our fight against the coronavirus. Operation Warp Speed is going to get everybody that wants a vaccine the vaccine by the summer. This comes, though, as hospitalizations reach a record high in the U.S., with more than 96,000 people admitted, 18,000 of them in the ICU. So what does this mean for the rest of the country? You guessed it, more of these insane restrictions. In New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo says he's leaning toward another lockdown if hospitals continue to see cases rise. Watch.
If we hit a real hospitalization crisis, we could potentially do a New York pause. California just did a California pause, which is basically a stop, or move one zone to another if we have a critical hospital situation.
Meanwhile, other state officials are cracking down as well. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy banned outdoor gatherings larger than 25 people, as well as all indoor youth and high school sports. And in California, Governor Gavin Newsom says 51 of the state's 58 counties could be placed under a stay-at-home order. When does it end? When do we learn? Here to weigh in on this is my friend, my man, Jesse Kelly, host of I'm Right with Jesse Kelly, right here on The First TV. Jesse, good to see you.
Oh, it's great to be here in the still free state of Texas, Buck. You are apparently absolutely turbo screwed, but we'll be okay at least for a while down here.
Yeah, I'd put a pin in that one, Jesse, because I remember there was a period there where even the state of Texas, what was it, earlier in the summer, they all decided that they were going to start locking things down a bit. But it hasn't been nearly as crazy as it is up here in New York and New Jersey, that's for sure. I mean, I want to ask you, when do you think we reach a point here where people will just start looking at a very straightforward observation? We have not opened up as a country, that we are not at normal, nothing even close to it. There's universal masking going on in major cities. All the data shows that, all the polls, everything. Just walk around the streets of New York. Everyone's wearing a mask. And indoors, everyone's wearing a mask. And yet here we are with cases higher than they were on a day-to-day basis than even at the height of the initial pandemic, when we were straight up being told by Dr. Fauci and others, you don't need to wear a mask. So what's the missing piece here for people to understand, Jesse? The government cannot protect you from this. The government does not know how to stop this.
The missing piece for everybody is they do not realize the government is supposed to be afraid of you, and everybody's afraid of the government. It really comes down to that. People ask all the time when this stuff's going to end, because there's going to be a surge every cold and flu season. There's always going to be a new excuse. I don't want to hear about vaccines, because even once they give you the vaccine, you'll still be at risk of a new strain of this, because at no point in time in the history of mankind has a politician looked at the power he held in his hands and said, I think I'll give some back. That has never once happened. So people, two things are going to happen. Only one of two things will end this. Either these people will get thrown out of office, a likely winner is going to get tossed out of office at his next election, and then they'll all wake up and leave. Or, and this is something I don't want, I know you don't want it, I don't think anybody wants it, somebody or bodies are going to get hurt, and get hurt badly. That's the only two ways that this stuff stops. Right now, all these idiot politicians do this because they think they can get away with it.
Well, I think that we're seeing something happening with more regularity now, which is where the state, when there's a mandate, and I've been saying this so long, if they want to do this sort of Orwellian propaganda thing of stand further apart in the elevator, as if any person with an IQ above that of a toaster thinks that actually keeps you any safer. They want to do that stuff, that's fine. It's when they have regulations and mandates. This all has the force of law behind it. This is what I think people forget in all this. This isn't the government making a suggestion. It's not like the government's food pyramid, or they're saying, don't eat 6 cheeseburgers a day or whatever. Sometimes you want to eat 6 cheeseburgers. I'm sorry, I thought this was America. But I'm saying eventually they do send people with guns to shut down your restaurant, your gym, your bar, perhaps even into your private home. And when you say, no, I don't want to obey your unconstitutional mandate, it's not even really a law, they're just making up as they go along, then we do have problems. And I think there's been enough of this now that people realize that's only going to grow.
Do they realize it, Buck? Because election fraud or no election fraud, we're not even going to get into that, I'm sure, right now. Maybe we are. But half the country went and voted for Joe Biden. Maybe less than half, maybe more than half. I guess we'll work all that out. Are people that mad about it? I mean, I'm
not
old enough to remember when they told us, yeah, not enough. They told us coronavirus was here, and they went on TV, everybody, and said, go home and hide in your house underneath your bed for 15 days and suck on your thumb. And free Americans all went, okay, daddy government, you just let me know when I can come out again. And then they kept doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, and nobody's been hurt. Nobody's been thrown out of office. You say you're mad. I know you're mad. I know I'm mad. How mad is America as a whole? I think we're actually okay with it as long as the scary virus doesn't get us.
Well, I think a big part of it is if you look at the polling, the media has managed to convince people. I mean, the mass media has created a mass hysteria, as I say. They've convinced people that their specific risk, if they're under the age of 50, is something like 30 times greater than it actually is from this virus, right? That's I'm sure, low. I think it's probably more like 100 times if you really did a more thorough analysis of it. But that then brings me also to, so we got a few areas. One is that anybody paying attention realizes these mandates, all this stuff, how exactly is this working? More cases than ever before, more hospitalizations than ever before. Oh, it would have been so much worse if we weren't all mask shaming each other? I'm sorry, I don't buy it. Beyond that, here is a spokesperson for the Los Angeles County Supervisor, Sheila Kuhl, after being caught enjoying a meal at an outdoor restaurant. Jesse, she went out to a fancy place, I actually know the place, in Santa Monica for an outdoor meal hours after voting to ban outdoor dining, and made a public statement that she was doing so because outdoor dining is dangerous. I think the hypocrisy, again, not enough people figured this out. The hypocrisy shows that, some of us are more equal than others during COVID.
How mad are people, Buck? I hate to keep it going back, but you tell me. Look, I covered this story today too. Sheila Kuhl, she pulls the dirtiest thing you can imagine, votes to shut down your small business, and then goes and does exactly what she told you not to do. Let me ask you something, Buck. I'm looking through the news. Maybe I missed it. Was there a protest in front of her office today? Did she have people screaming at her as she got in her car? Were people flashing lights like the leftists love to do inside of her home at night? Not that I think anybody should approach somebody's home. I'm not saying that. How mad are people? I saw a bunch of news articles. I saw a bunch of this. This is a woman destroying livelihoods and then giving everybody the proverbial double middle finger with no fear whatsoever of the populace. I'm at the point, I'm rooting for these scumbags to rub it in everyone's face bad enough just so the American people will wake up and actually do something about it.
I got to say this, and not just because we apparently rummage through each other's closets to dress the same on TV. You are one of the few people who at the very beginning, you were right there with me publicly being called an advocate of mass murder, because as soon as the initial data was coming out, we're saying, guys, this is crazy. We can't do this. I mean, the economic and societal implications and the trampling on freedom and the unconstitutionality, we can't. And all the pandemic playbooks up to this year had said, I mean, we never actually do a lockdown. That's insane. We were saying at the beginning, this can't happen. One major underestimation I have here. I actually am not surprised at how much shenanigans and fraud have gone on with the Democrats in the election. I think that we could say that was probably expected. I mean, they haven't really gotten caught yet with the full spectrum. But anyway, I am surprised, to your recurring point here, that people aren't more fed up with this and that they're not willing to just say mass non-compliance is the only way for them to leave us the hell alone. And I don't know what to say about it other than that's my only surprise from the perspective of the people.
Well, look, I don't want to come off as bitter, but it has been the biggest wake-up call I've had in my entire life of the status of where we are as Americans with our mentality in 2020, back when they told everyone to go home and everybody did. That should have been mass non-compliance day one. Day one, a mayor, governor, president, senator tells you, you go home and close your small business and lose your livelihood. Why? Because I said so? The American response is, go screw yourself. I'll be open tomorrow. And that's all my friends' responses too. That should have been the American response, but it wasn't. And so now we're wondering, well, when are they going to stop hurting us? They're politicians. They're never going to get tired of rubbing their power in your face until you make them afraid, period.
It's true. Jesse Kelly, everybody. I'm right with Jesse Keller. I guess he's right, but watch his show. You get what I'm saying. Jesse, good to see you, man.
Be good, my brother.
I'm a big-time coffee drinker, and Black Rifle is the coffee I'm drinking every day. Black Rifle Coffee was founded by a veteran who serves premium coffee to people who love America. That veteran is a CEO and a founder, Evan Hafer. He spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with the U.S. Special Forces. Evan even modified his gun trucks during the invasion of Iraq to grind coffee anywhere. For him, coffee's more than a business. It's his true passion. Through coffee, Evan was able to experience that perfect morning every morning, whether he was in Kabul or Seattle or anywhere. There's nothing better than starting your day with America's coffee. Go to blackriflecoffee.com/buck today and check out the best coffee in America. America's Coffee makes your holiday shopping easy with personalized bundles, gifted subscriptions to the Coffee Club, gift cards, and a whole lot of premium coffee, apparel, and gear. Make your holidays better with Black Rifle Coffee. That's blackriflecoffee.com/buck to get you 20% off coffee, apparel, and gear, as well as 20% off your first month of the Coffee Club. A little over a year ago now, as COVID-19 was beginning its spread around the globe, the world sought answers. Where did the virus come from? How deadly is it? Who's most at risk? Our so-called experts were perplexed, but all eyes ultimately turned to one place: China, the origin of this pandemic. We had hoped for transparency, honesty, and forthrightness, but look, we were dealing with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So what we got were lies, half-truths, and shoddy cover-ups. All the hallmarks of the communist Chinese regime. With each passing day, we began to learn more, but now the pieces are really coming together. Today, we will examine all the communist mistruths surrounding the Wuhan flu on the Buck Brief. Now, let's just state that there wasn't a whole lot of willingness in the mainstream media to go along with what Trump was saying during the campaign, that China was the source of this. In fact, I remember governors like the governor of New York saying that it was the European virus or the Italian virus, specifically because of where it was traced during the spread of the pandemic, which was, of course, absurd and insane, but it was necessary for them to give a talking point to those who hate Trump. So we couldn't talk about the origins of the virus in China. But now, and we have this trove of documents leaked to CNN, and since they think Trump is finished in this election, they believe it's time for them to share all this stuff. Leaked documents reveal China's mishandling of the early stages of COVID-19. Now, we've all known this all along, but it's very interesting because at different phases of this, we were led to believe, well, China was able to control the pandemic. China was able to get a handle on this. Was that really true? It all depends on what you mean by getting a handle on it. First of all, in February of this year, only 2/3 of new cases were actually reported. So on February 10th, Hubei officials reported just over 3,900 new COVID-19 cases, while internal documents show more than 50% more than that, with figures divided into subcategories. So understand this. This is not that they were missing cases and just didn't know, because that can certainly happen in a pandemic. The internal documents show that they were just lying. They were just trying to show people, oh, no, it's less than what we're telling you. It's less than, it's less than you think it is. And they were giving fake numbers. They were cooking the books. Daily cases, going back to March of 2020, were also underreported. You've got both daily new cases and total deaths appear underreported. And you can see here, reported to the public, 83 cases. In the documents, 115 cases. So at every stage here, they were trying to bring the numbers down to show that they had some idea of how best to control this thing. Let's not forget that there were also early reports coming out of China during the pandemic that suggested that the crematoriums in places like Wuhan were running on such an extended timetable, and that the morgues were operating at such higher levels. Here you go. Cremation numbers reveal possible suppression of true COVID-19 data in China. the Chinese Communist Party was never being forthright with the world or with its own people about just how bad the pandemic outbreak was there. So on June 17th of 2020, the mutant strain in China's real coronavirus death toll could be 14 times higher as second wave sees families quarantined behind razor wire. That was in the U.S. Sun. So there was a lot of reporting that didn't end up, that wasn't true, but we couldn't really trust what was coming out of China the whole time. So that means when you know you can't believe the numbers, when you see things like this, you say, hold on a second, what's really going on? And so there was a lot of misreporting about what was happening in China too. You had the cremation deaths. We showed you that one, another very important indicator here that there were problems. Oh, and China lied about the origin of it. New York Post back on April 5th said that China was, according to leaked intelligence, they were trying to pretend it wasn't from them. So here's just a short way of saying it. The CNN internal documents that have been published, and then the entire history of how China has presented this to the whole world shows that they were lying and that they made this a much greater risk for the international community, for the global community, than it would have otherwise been, because turns out an authoritarian regime might be good for, churning out with state-supported companies a whole lot of iPhones or sneakers or whatever, but not good at preparing itself or the world for dealing with a virus like this, because inherently they don't want there to be criticism of their handling. So what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to handle that? By suppressing the truth and suppressing important information. Even by the AP back on June 3rd of 2020, China delayed releasing coronavirus info, and this frustrated the World Health Organization. So while the rest of the world was scrambling to figure out what was going on here, China was making sure that it was a PR exercise first and not a medical and health emergency that it was sharing information with the rest of the world about. And we paid a price for this. There were consequences that came out of this. And I think that they should be held accountable. Although, does anyone think that a Biden administration is really going to hold China accountable for any of this? Does anybody believe that Joe Biden, who had his son trying to get money, as we know, from Chinese companies, Chinese businessmen to sell access, anyone think that they're really going to be tough on China? I think the answer is certainly no. But let's not forget who was at the basis of all of this, who was at the origin story of the COVID-19 pandemic. Chinese Communist Party, my friends, and we all paid a terrible price because of their disingenuousness, their delay, and yes, their outright lies. And now even CNN is printing documents about that, now that it's safe. Now that we don't have to focus on just Trump as the cause of the whole novel coronavirus. Economic uncertainty has left us all wondering about the future. Stock market seems to blow back and forth like the winds of political change. So what do we do to protect ourselves and our income for the future? For over a decade now, simple and conservative real estate investing has been the retirement answer for thousands of done-for-you real estate clients. It's now part of my answer to retirement. I'm not just a believer in what done-for-you real estate does, I'm also a client. I recently closed on my first ever investment property, all through my friends at Done-For-You Real Estate. Their system flat out works. Done-For-You Real Estate found me an amazing property, got me the financing, got it all fixed up, and are now renting it out and managing it for me. They're an award-winning, groundbreaking company with 13 years of experience that allows everyday, hardworking Americans to finally own investment real estate without all the risk and difficulty of doing it on your own. Visit doneforyoubuck.com to learn more and find out if you qualify to take advantage of what may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally own your own investment real estate.
I don't want to scare anybody here, but understand the facts. We're likely to lose another 250,000 people dead between now and January. You hear me? Because people aren't paying attention.
We got Sleepy Joe Biden echoing warnings from public health experts about the U.S. coronavirus death toll, driving more fear and anxiety among Americans. This after the so-called president-elect announced some of the first mandates he'll demand we follow. Watch.
On the first day I'm inaugurated to say I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days. And I think we'll see a significant reduction if we occur that, if that occurs with vaccinations and masking to drive down the numbers considerably.
Because we haven't been masking already? Is that really the plan, Mr. Biden? Wear a mask, close your business, cancel everything, stay home. We've turned the corner, my friends. If we don't stand up to this government overreach now, we're not going to get the chance to do so again until the damage is fully done. Joining me now is someone who's been very outspoken on this over the past few months, Alex Berenson, former New York Times reporter and author of the hit online, Unreported Truths About COVID-19 and Lockdowns. All right, Alex, let's just jump into this because I'm not a doctor, don't play one on TV. But I do know that I live in New York City and we've been masking and had all these rules and regulations in place for months. And now they're telling us we need to do more of that while the cases are surging in major urban areas across the country. If this stuff works, why isn't it working?
Well, I think that's a great question. The answer is that it doesn't really work. Nothing really works very well except being the right time of year and sort of being outside and not being forced to be inside a lot. There's considerable evidence that masks really don't protect the wearer at all, and now we have a new big study out of Denmark that was very well designed and done that essentially proved that beyond any doubt. Masks do not protect the wearer from coronavirus. I'm not talking about N95 respirators when they're properly worn. I'm talking about the masks that most people wear every day and that are sort of realistic to expect people to wear. And then this question of source control, whether or not my mask protects you, as you've heard, that turns out to be probably nonsense too. The reasons are sort of technical, and I go into them in the booklet. But the fact is that the masks are they're just not essentially, they're not able to filter out particles that are small enough to make much of a difference. The viral particle itself is too small, and what are called aerosol particles, which contain a lot of the virus that does transmit the COVID, are also too small for most masks to filter out. So those don't work. Lockdowns, maybe they work temporarily. It's not really clear, but it is also, what is very clear is that if you lock down hard and then you eventually you have to have society back, you have to let up on the lockdown, eventually the virus comes back. Europe saw that very, very clearly this fall. All these people who are telling us all these important things we need to do back in July and August, they were telling us what a great job Europe had done. Europe had suppressed this virus and we hadn't. France, Italy, they'd done the right things. They'd contact trace, they'd locked down for months. Finally, they'd begun to let up. Well, guess what? France, Italy, Spain, the UK, and really all of Europe have had terrible outbreaks or, very large outbreaks this fall. And, because when you lock down, you just delay the virus from spreading, widely enough that we get to herd immunity or something close to it. Now, here's one thing that might actually work. Okay, I follow the science. I do my best to follow the science. The early vaccine data looks very promising, and that's a good thing. We should be happy about that. I'm not saying we should all run out to take this vaccine right now. I think we need to see safety data. And I think for people who are in low risk categories, there's no real urgency to do this. But when we're talking about people who are at, really high risk, really elderly people with severe comorbidities, this vaccine, these vaccines, they might do some good. But the fact is, whatever we do or don't do, and let's hope vaccines can sort of take get us to a better place, in the relatively near future. This vaccine, so many people in the United States have now gotten COVID or gotten SARS-CoV-2 and recovered from it, that it looks like I think we are closer to the end of this than the beginning, no matter what we do. There's a plausible case to be made that more than 100 million Americans, almost a third of the country, have already gotten this. So Alex, this idea that, sorry.
That's okay. No, go ahead. Finish your point. The idea that...
So this idea that, there's just terrible, terrible days ahead. If a third of the country's already been past this, then we're closer to the end of this than the beginning, with or without a vaccine.
Now, the CDC director, masks is something that's near and dear to my heart because I have to wear them on the treadmill. I have to wear them when I walk through my lobby in New York. I hate this. I think this is absurd. I see people when I get into taxis pull their mask up after it's been down for, the last 2 hours or the last 30 minutes or whatever it is when they're starting their shift. So we can all see that this is an imperfect science at best. When the CDC director says that the science is settled on this, and I'm asking you this honestly, what is he talking about? Where is the science that settles that this, because anyone just observing, not even pretending to be a scientist, looking around would say that these policies of social distancing and masking have not in any way been worth the cost and the irritation. So is there science? Is there data that we can all read and look at to at least see what the CDC director is talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at what they're talking about that supports their case. It's very weak, okay? And to get into why, let me give you an example that I use in the booklet, okay? What you want are what are called randomized controlled trials. That's where you take a large group of people, you split them into, usually two categories. You give one category a drug and you give the other category a placebo. And then at the end, whether it's a month or 6 months or a year, however long, you see if something's changed. So that's why if you go to the doctor and you have high cholesterol, that doctor is going to say, hey, you should take a statin, because there's really good evidence that statins will lower your cholesterol and probably reduce the risk of your heart attack, you having a heart attack or a stroke. Okay, they've done this work, so they know. There is nothing like that showing that masks do any good, essentially. And in fact, again, when you go back to this Danish trial, it shows the opposite. It shows that masks don't really work. So what do they have? What do these people who say masks work have? They have a bunch of stuff from laboratories showing that masks, when they're properly fitted, seem to slow the spread of somewhat large particles in human breath. And they have what are called observational studies. And one they always come back to is, well, there were these two hairdressers in Missouri who had COVID, and they had 139 patients, and they wore masks, and 139 clients, and all those clients wore masks, and nobody got COVID. Okay, that sounds good. Here's the problem. We don't know whether maybe that hair salon had really good ventilation. We don't know whether those two hairdressers just happened to be careful, whether they happened not to be very infectious for some reason. We don't know. That's why we have to do really good clinical trials. In medicine, the ultimate line is first, do no harm. And medicine learned this the hard way for about a millennia, when they bloodlet and they used leeches and they put holes in people's heads, and terrible, ideas were tried, and they were never really tested in a thorough way, and they became part of the culture of medicine. And in the last 150 years, medicine has gone away from that, and they've gone to this idea of, we need clinical trials. We need really to test things. And suddenly with COVID, that's out the window. And that's why, look, I'm not a scientist, although I covered the drug industry for the New York Times for a long time, and I've written a lot about science and medicine over the last 20 years. But there are very good scientists out there who just think what we're doing right now is a huge mistake and is going to have long-term impacts on science, because we're going back to this idea of, oh, it sounds good, and here's 3 people out there who would seem to work for, so everybody's got to do it now. That's
Before
a mistake.
Before we let you go, Alex, I've got to ask you, the Great Barrington Declaration, I mean, I signed it, so my name is there online. I'm sure you signed it too. Aren't those scientists? Why do we always hear, listen to the scientists, and then there are these scientists, you're bringing up some of them now, who don't agree with lockdowns as a policy because of all the things we know about keeping children out of school, drug abuse, suicide, addiction, obesity, all these things that it worsens. Do they not count as scientists? I don't understand.
Well, I mean, they're actually very, very good scientists. And in many cases, they're not conservative. A lot of these people are quite progressive and are just worried about the societal effect of lockdowns and how poor people are getting hit harder. That's a media problem, okay? That's a problem of, we're not going to explain to you that there's real dissension in the scientific community about this. We're just going to tell you what Tony Fauci says, and the fact that these people from Harvard and Oxford and Stanford and lots of other places disagree. We don't care. It doesn't count.
Got to ask you this. Got to ask you this before we let you go, Alex. Would you, if you were advising an incoming administration, would you tell them to fire Dr. Fauci at this point?
I would, but he didn't just not get fired. He's getting promoted. He's going to run the whole show.
A classic bureaucrat, but you would fire him. So would I. Alex, good luck on the book. Thanks so much for all your work on this, and we'll be out there in the battles. I'll see you.
Thanks, Buck.
These days, being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I'm sure you've noticed the world we live in is anything but predictable. We could all benefit from something reliable right about now. What could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group now. Learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now, 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now at 833-600-GOLD. Don't wait for inflation to kick in. Don't wait to see what the economy does and what happens to the dollars in your bank account. You think the national debt's going to go away? No, it's only going to get bigger. There's going to be a lot of pressure on the Fed. Go take action today. Diversify, protect yourself with gold. 833-600-GOLD. Joe Biden accidentally says the quiet part out loud. Tempers flare over at CNBC over COVID lockdowns. And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy has some words for Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Settle up, friends. Time for the buckshot. Now, there are people like me who have been saying for many months now, it seems likely, seems probable. Now, this is a prediction, so who knows, but it seems very, very plausible, very possible that you might have Joe Biden decide, just because in the middle of a presidency, if he becomes president, I know, but if that were to happen, that he would step down. Why finish it out? His age is up there, and he could very easily pass the torch to Kamala Harris and be a Democrat hero for all ages, right? They would love him on the left. And then he said this, which is interesting. Play it.
When we disagree, it'll be just like, so far, it's been just like when Barack and I did. It's in private. She'll say, I think we should do A, B, C, or D. And I'll say, I like A, don't like B and C. And let's go, okay. And like I told Barack, if I reach something where there's a fundamental disagreement we have based on a moral principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign.
I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign. Why does his mind go there when he's talking about a disagreement with a vice president? Anybody want to come up with a plausible explanation for that one? How many of you have thought, yeah, if I have a disagreement in the workplace, I'm just going to develop a disease and resign? He said it. I'm just repeating it. Seems interesting. Remember Santelli? Back in the day, this guy got the whole Tea Party thing started. A lot of people don't know that. He called for a Tea Party on the floor of I believe it was the Chicago, either Mercantile Exchange, I think. But he called for it on CNBC, a Tea Party. It actually happened, big political movement. Anyway, some interesting recent history for you. I agree with him. That's not going to surprise you. He got into a little bit of a spat with the darling of the liberals. They love this guy, Andrew Ross Sorkin over there. Play this.
Restaurant, or frankly, even a church, are so different, it's unbelievable. Going into a big box retailer,
I disagree.
You're wearing
You can
a mask.
have your thoughts and I can have mine.
You're required to wear a mask.
I disagree.
It's science. I'm sorry. It's science. If you're
It's
wearing a
not
mask,
science.
it's a different story.
500 people at a Lowe's aren't any safer than 150 people in a restaurant that holds 600. I don't believe it. Sorry. Don't believe it. And I live in an area where there's a lot of restaurants that have fought back and they don't have any problems. And they're open.
Okay. You don't have to believe it. But let me just say this. You're doing a disservice to the viewer because the viewers need to understand it.
You are doing a disservice to the viewer. You are. You are.
He is. I agree with Santelli here. Notice how the liberal move is saying, it's the science. It's the science. These are people who not only don't know anything about science, you sit around and wonder, what do they know about exactly? Are these intellectually curious people that apply rigorous thought and independent approaches to problems like this? No, they do not. But that had to do with whether or not you should have big stores open, but not churches. Why? Oh, because of masks, right? The masks have become this carve-out. As you know, I have my problems with all this, big problems. So the New York Young Republicans Club, a great group based here in New York City. They had a gala, but the gala wasn't, in fact, in New York City. It was just across the river in New Jersey, because they got to obey the rules. So they obeyed Jersey rules. The governor of New Jersey, Murphy, he had this to say about Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was the keynote speaker at the New York Young Republicans Club event. Play it.
It is beyond the pale that anyone would willingly endanger people in another state, never mind their own. It is also beyond the pale that a member of Congress, actually go back if you could, would participate in this. And that is, no, I want you to go back to the group if you could, Mahan. That guy in the middle, the tall, handsome fellow in the gray suit, that is Representative Matt Gaetz. And based on his past performances, it is obvious being a knucklehead is not beyond the pale for him. He was actually Sarah Palin's backup act for this event. Now, if you go to the next kind of a scene.
I guess I wish I had gone to this, because then maybe they would have called me a tall, handsome man, the governor of New Jersey. That would have been kind of fun. But yeah, turns out that people obey the rules as the rules are laid out. And if you don't like those rules, then maybe you shouldn't have such arbitrary and stupid rules, Governor Murphy. And then Pelosi. You know, there's all this back and forth over COVID relief funds. Who's really to blame for millions and millions of Americans not actually getting those COVID relief funds? Pelosi let it slip today that, oh yeah, she's to blame. Play it.
Not to accept half of a loaf months ago when you said, I'm not going to accept half a loaf.
Look, I'm going to tell you something.
Now,
don't characterize what we did before as a mistake, as a preface to your question, if you want an answer. That was not a mistake. It was a decision, and it has taken us to a place where we can do the right thing without other, shall we say, considerations in the legislation that we don't want. Now, that is it.
Yes, Nancy has been blocking it, and maybe now she'll stop, because when the peasants get restless enough, she doesn't want them going for the pitchforks and the torches. She'll throw them some crumbs while she eats cake. That's Nancy for you.